Okay. And so what we'll do in a few seconds is I'll just dive right in and welcome you, and then we'll take it from there and discuss all the types of things we discussed earlier in the week, okay?
Yeah,
And
sounds good.
you pronounce your last name Muleman?
No, Molamin.
Molaman. Okay, like
Molamin.
three syllables. Okay.
3 syllables. Yep,
Okay. I didn't ask that last time. I'm sorry.
no problem. It's Schweizerdeutsch.
Okay. So we are recording, and
Okay.
I'd like to welcome Jan Muleman to RF Podluza. She is the CEO and founder of the Regroup agency. And Jan, I understand you have a real important milestone coming up soon. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We do. It is our 20th anniversary as Regroup. And if I could just keep going, our Regroup is actually the 4th generation of a company that I founded many, many years ago in 1974, and had the good fortune of gaining a little client that grew into a big client, grew the agency, determined that we had a lot going for us. We sold the agency, folded into a much larger agency. That agency sold to Omnicom. Then we spun out of that agency and joined Fitch, which was an international design consultancy, and that sold and that sold and that sold. And in 2003, we bought ourselves back and became Regroup.
Well, you said that sounds like a history of the advertising industry over the last few decades, with all the M&As and spin-offs
Yes.
and client shifts. But going back to the very beginning of your lineage, you started with a really well-known brand name, which makes and sells one of my favorite food groups. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we had the good fortune to be approached by Tom Monahan of Domino's Pizza because he thought he had failed to respond to a protest that had been filed against his registration of the name Domino's Pizza by Domino's Sugar, Amstar. And he thought he had lost the use of the name, and he was going to pursue it in court, but he wanted to make sure that in the event that he lost, he could change the name. And so we developed what was at the time a 2-module identity. And in fact, 5 years later, when we were the agency of record for him, he lost in district court down in Atlanta, lost the use of the name. We actually switched out the inside graphics of the signs and the patches and the logos on the boxes to Pizza Dispatch, kept opening stores. And then when he won at appellate court, we switched it all back. So the identity actually worked exactly as we had planned. And in the end, they kept both names. They used Pizza Dispatch as an experimental name for a while until they transitioned everything back to Domino's Pizza.
Well, that's brand identity management, if I could ever say it. Why don't we talk a little bit more about the beginning of Regroup in 2003?
Okay. What happened with Regroup in 2003 is that, as I said, we had been part of Fitch, and then Fitch sold multiple times, and we ended up being part of WPP. So we were part of Omnicom Network, and then we were part of WPP Network. And at that point in time, we really did not think that they were going to want another little agency in their stable. And we were really tired of not focusing on our clients and ourselves. And we were in a position where we could basically buy ourselves out and become Regroup. So the core team, there were 5 of us founders, and that core team actually had been together all the way through Fitch and Ross Roy, and some of us had even been together as far back as the Group 243 days, which was the original agency. And we wanted to make our own decisions. We believed that we had a better approach to client, providing client solutions, which was making sure that we were covering every client touch point, client customer touch point, customer journey. And we felt that we could manage our own destiny better than being part of a large company.
Now, in your agency's background, in your background, you have a lot of retail and or franchise experience. How is that different than servicing a regular, consumer products type brand?
There is a huge difference in managing a multi-unit, either retail or franchise. And in a franchise organization, it's doubly complex because franchisees are owners and they have a certain amount of autonomy. And I like to say that all franchisees are from the state of Missouri. You have to show them in order to get them to comply with what you want to do. And in a franchise organization, you might, as a corporation, have the authority to say, this is your marketing program. But in reality, the franchisee has the power to say, no, I'm not going to do it. So you have to use your influence in order to gain alignment and collaboration and support throughout the organization. And it's not that terribly different in a corporately owned multi-unit, where the people at the corporation are pretty far removed from that point of sale and customer experience. So you have to make sure all the stakeholders are aligned around the brand and around your purpose and your mission in order for you to truly have consistent customer experience.
So in effect, you have two groups of clients at the same time.
Absolutely.
And sometimes they may or may not be aligned in terms of how they see the business.
Very often they're not.
No,
Very often they're not.
I've heard stories with my friends who've worked in the franchise space. So going back to Regroup, I assume the name came out of the fact that you regrouped.
Partly. The name of our first original business was Group 243. We actually started at 243 East 16th Avenue in Columbus, Ohio. So we moved from being Buckeyes to being Wolverines.
I noticed that, yeah.
So it is in part a nod to our origins and our original name, and it is also in part an acknowledgement that we all have to regroup. And it's actually a term that is used a lot in business. People say, sure, oh boy, we have to regroup. Something happened, we have to regroup. So it supports what we consider our brand position, which is we are a brand transformation agency, which we work with a lot of clients who find themselves in a situation where something needs to change. Either their competitive environment has gotten too difficult, or their franchisees are unhappy, or their sales are down, and you need to change. You need to do something different. And we very often are brought in first as consultants to their business problem and saying, here's what's going on, what can we do about it? And then also as executioners, or as implementers.
That type of executioner, but okay, I get it.
Implementers of the
implementers. Okay, there you go. One of the tools that you developed early on at one of the agencies through your career was the customer journey. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. You know, when we first started, we came out, myself and my founding partner and many of our team members came out of the Ohio State Department of Industrial Design. And as such, our philosophy was that design was a problem-solving approach, that if you take the right approach, you could basically solve any problem. So we did not start out in advertising. We started out really holistically looking at what is the business problem? Where is this communication channel breaking down? What do we need to do? What are all the touch points that we need to cover? And at the time, we called it seamless communication, so that you were making sure that every touch point was delivering on the brand promise, delivering the customer experience that you wanted to have. And we were completely channel agnostic. That actually led us at the time into retail store design. And it led us into a complete 360 look at what was the customer experience. And we were really pretty far ahead of where the advertising industry was at the time.
Well, that's great. And one of the things that impressed me about your agency was that you have a very good set, solid set of core values. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, you know, and hopefully you can edit this. I'm not remembering them off the top of my head. So
I edit, believe me, it takes hours. But what I was looking at, putting people first.
yes.
So let me pose the question. You know, you don't have to recite your mission statement or anything, but
Okay.
let me pose the question again. So one of the things that impressed me about Regroup was that you have a really good, solid set of core values. So why don't we address that?
Okay. Well, one of our key core values is people first. And by people first, it means a lot of different things. One is it means that for our employees, we are committed to providing an environment where we help them grow and achieve as much as they possibly can. For our clients, it is that we are working very collaboratively with them. We are partnering with them. And for their customers, their end users, it is that we are acknowledging that all people want to be treated with respect, and that how we deliver our communication to them has to be respectful at the same time that it is informative and persuasive. But it's recognizing that there's in our world today, where we are really driven by technology on a lot of different levels, and trust me, we use technology and we use data, but we want to preserve the human connection, the human quality that makes us who we are as people.
You know, I've run a couple of agencies, and one of the things that always troubled me is we did what I would call accordion staffing. You know, it would expand and contract depending upon clients. Now, I grew up in a really big agency where they hardly fired anyone. And, you know, there's an old adage in our industry, I forget who said it, maybe David Ogilvy, that each day all of our assets go in and out of the elevator.
Yes.
So obviously, when you lose a client, sometimes you have no choice but to let people go. But how do you feel about keeping that core group of people together?
Well, we're really proud of the fact that we have
Well,
for
that's
a
great.
long time. And we have obviously added new team members as we've grown. And I would say sometimes we keep people to a fault. But that is the advantage of being independent. When you
Sure.
are independent, you write the checks and you get to decide, okay, we're going through a down period. Let's look and see how long do we think this is going to last? What are we going to do to get out of it? And then how can we manage? What are we willing to risk in order to keep the good people that we have together as a team? That happens. Agencies go up and down all the time.
Sure, yeah.
We like being able to make those decisions ourselves. I've been in an environment where it was dictated to me, and it's not fun.
I bet you that had something to do with a holding company.
Yeah.
They answer to the beat of Wall Street, and if you can't increase your profits every year, which maybe some years breaking even isn't a bad thing if you can keep your culture together. That's at least my opinion, and it seems to be
Exactly.
sort of yours. So,
And I have tremendous respect for holding companies. I still have a fair amount of stock in Omnicom. I respect who they are and what they do. That's just not how I want to run a business.
no, I mean, who wants to be considered a hired gun at any agency? Because they know that their days are tied to the days of the account. And they're really, I mean, what I've seen, those type of people, it's hard to integrate them fully into the culture of the agency. And I think culture is a really important thing for agencies. And I'm sure you agree with that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So one of the things that you say in one of your mission statement or your core value statement is that you want to be digitally responsible. So what does that mean to you?
Well, that gets back to two things. One thing that we already talked about, which is the people first philosophy, and that is treating your customers with respect. That means respecting their how they want to communicate with you, whether it is giving them the option to opt into communication with you or the option to opt out, obviously, and making sure that we are approaching the use of digital technology in a way that is human and respectful. The second aspect of that is making sure we are respecting your brand so that we are not using tools, we're not putting you in places that are not compatible with your brand and your brand philosophy. So even though there might be an audience on this particular network or channel, or these influencers are having a lot of success reaching a particular audience that you might want to reach, if their values don't match your values, we're not going to consider that. So there's that human respect side, as well as understanding and respecting the values of your own brand.
For sure, yeah. And so that leads me right into some of the biggest topics in our industry today, Chat GPT and AI. Do you have any philosophy on that, or is it still developing, as most people are, I guess? But
I would say we are still developing that. We have written a policy for our team on the use of that. It includes transparency to our clients when we do use any kind of an AI technology. Obviously, in the media world, media has been using AI for quite a while. And so even,
yeah, but
Google
that's a little different than creative. I mean, because algorithmic media has been around. I mean, yeah, it's being more efficient, but when you get into the creative area, I think it's a lot different.
Well, we are encouraging our teams to explore and use it and see how we can incorporate it into the work that we do. And they are. But again, as I said, we are being really transparent. It's never strictly an AI generated product. It is we are using it for research, we are using it to concept, and then our creative teams are choosing what elements of that should be incorporated in any solutions that we come up with. So we're approaching it cautiously, but it's a tool.
Sure.
And it's going to be here, and we're going to use it. So
Okay.
we have to figure out what that is.
You just want to make sure the tool is put in the right hands, hence the focus on your people and your culture.
Exactly.
So, I was looking through your work that your agency has done, the creative work, and you've done some great stuff. Why don't you tell me about some of your campaigns?
Well, one of the clients that we have enjoyed working with and feel we have really contributed to their success is DTE. DTE is a energy utility. They are, and as a utility, they are in a low engagement category. And often you find that utilities don't do much in terms of marketing and advertising and talking on a regular basis to their customers. What we have found, and it has been supported by the research that they have done with JD Power, as well as their NPS studies, that people feel better about their energy company, their utility, when they have had communications from them. And that includes advertising. So our performance is measured by their customer satisfaction. And our goal is to help them maintain that target level of customer satisfaction. That means that we're constantly listening to what is going on with the consumer. We are always prepared to respond in a crisis, because utilities have storms and trees fall down on power lines and that sort of thing. We are prepared to be very responsive and get messages out to the consumers as soon as that happens. And in general, we have been successful at helping them maintain their target levels of customer satisfaction.
That's great. And there's a campaign that I saw for the University of Michigan, a Wash Your Hands campaign, which featured some really pop art, I guess, for lack of a better term. Tell me about that one.
That was done for the University of Michigan Health System, which is now called U of M Health or Michigan Medicine. And it was an internal campaign when they were trying to really raise their scores for safety and internal steps that they could do in order to make sure that their docs, their nurses, their assistants were managing their level of bacterial exposure. And so this campaign was developed so that we had buttons, we had posters that went in the bathrooms, and it was
great posters, by the way.
yeah, they were, and they're very fun. They're the, oh my God, the invasion of the hand monsters kind of thing. And it got tremendous attention. It was very well received by the internal audiences, by the docs and the nurses, and it actually helped change their behavior. So it was a very successful program.
And then you also did some work with one of my very favorite brands up there with Domino's, Ben and Jerry's. Can you tell me about what you've done for that, what you did for them, I guess?
Well, we did two things. That was done, first and foremost, it was done for the scoop shops. So Ben and Jerry had sold to Unilever, and Unilever was primarily focused on supporting the packaged goods side, the ice cream that was sold in the grocery store and that sort of thing. And they had about 150 scoop shops at the time. And the scoop shops were kind of feeling, and they were franchised, And they were kind of feeling like orphans because the people who sold them the concept, which was Ben and Jerry, were no longer involved. So, and Ben and Jerry had grown that brand by having a philosophy that focused on their quality and a philosophy that also focused on their philanthropy and their cause-related marketing. But they didn't have any kind of structure around their marketing program. So again, being a franchise, the expectation was the individual stores would figure out how to do their promotions. We were brought in to help provide that structure, to say, look, you're a retailer. There are, yes, we want to support your local events, but we're going to help develop national programs, national events, national promotions that we want you to participate in that will help drive your sales, drive your retail sales. And so we helped them build that calendar, and also in the process worked with them to restate their brand position for the entire brand, and then served as consultants to their internal creative team. So we would do the concepts, they would then implement those concepts.
Great.
But it was, again, very successful at getting the franchisees aligned around the brand and the brand promise, and getting them to participate in these programs.
That's a creative art in and of itself, from everything I've heard. So you focus on several core industries: franchise and retail, healthcare, energy, and professional services. One of the things that I think is a strength of having those areas of focus, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, is for a smaller to mid-sized agency that's located in a certain region, it allows you to go beyond your region in getting clients if they're in one of those four verticals. Is that true for you, for Regroup?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we know a lot about those categories, having had fairly seasoned team members who have worked in them. And one of the things that we look at, and we talked about this earlier, that we find is consistent in all those categories, is that the point of contact with the customer is all often fairly removed from the corporate headquarters. So it's that working through the distribution channel, aligning all your internal stakeholders so that they're delivering the brand experience that you want at point of sale. So there is that commonality on all of them, whether it is a healthcare system where you have docs and nurses and technicians who are actually your point of contact with the customer, or whether it's a pizza store. So there's a commonality there in what some of those needs are. But we have, heck, we even worked with Duskin, which is a conglomerate franchisor out of Osaka, Japan, to help them create their what they called their franchise package, which is to make sure that they had all the operating systems in place, the marketing systems in place, and the training in place for their franchisees and their franchisees' team members. And we worked with them for over 20 years and actually helped them bring American franchises to Japan. So they would have us find franchise companies that were in the US that would be compatible with the Japanese lifestyle and help bring those over to Japan.
That's cool. That's certainly reaching beyond your local region exponentially almost. So sort of changing the topic a little bit. One thing that's really of interest to me, maybe it's a pet peeve, I don't know, but I see that, I was in advertising in big agencies in the 80s and 90s and smaller agencies after that. And, we were all going through the digital transformation, right? And advertising is a lot different today than it was in the 80s. My feeling is that digital has dumbed down the advertising process a bit. And I was wondering if you have an opinion on that.
Well, one of the things that we are seeing from our clients is when they find themselves in a position where they've got 4, 5, 10 or more agencies that they're having to work with. And what we're seeing is that there is a need on the client side to have an agency that looks very holistically
Sure.
at all the channels that they're communicating through and making sure that the brand is being consistently implemented and executed. So I do think that there is a bit of a trend back to brand and understanding the importance of brand consistency. And I do think that I think that consumers recognize that. I mean, consumers are going to get tired of just having a bunch of digital ads flashed at them.
Sure.
Every time they launch a browser. It is getting to be wallpaper.
Yeah.
Remember when we called some ads wallpaper?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
digital advertising is getting to be wallpaper on your screen.
And it's interesting because with DTE, your prime measurement is customer satisfaction. And that's really a branding result, I think.
It is.
But, too many times, just because they can, digital ads are, even if they're intended to be branding, they're evaluated on clicks and conversions. And sometimes, it's an easy thing to get used to, right? It's data for the sake of data, I guess, in some cases. But you don't hear about, they don't call them branding campaigns anymore on digital media, at least in the world that I live in.
Well, there's a couple of points there. One is that when you're working with a franchise, yes, we report clicks, conversions, but all they care about is sales. So ultimately, the end goal of why are we advertising? It's either to create brand awareness, which is still, I think, a really important
Sure.
step that's required, and brand understanding. But ultimately, your measure is going to be sales. It may not be an immediate reaction to your campaign, but ultimately it's sales. And the other point that I think you're making is that we're also seeing a recognition that there needs to be a brand campaign. Now, how is that brand campaign delivered? It is delivered through all the channels. It is delivered through OTT. It is delivered through social media. It is, it's delivered everywhere that you can run video, that particularly video. I'm not disclaiming a still image, but particularly video can carry your brand personality and talk about your why, talk about who you are, not what you do and what you're trying to sell.
Sure. And forgot what I was going to ask. Damn it. I'm cutting this part out, actually. So, no, I had a good point. But let's move on. So I couldn't interview someone like yourself, being from where I am. without asking about RFPs. And so what role do RFPs play in your business development process?
Well, they are a very important part. And yes, thank you. We have actually won a client that we found on RFPalooza. So
There you
thank you
go.
very much for that support.
Well,
And you know, RFPs are probably forever going to be part of an agency's business development process. What we try to do is to be really selective of what ones we pursue, and recognizing that we have to have something of relevance that we can offer them. And that's another core value or philosophy, at least, that I have, which is every time you talk to a customer, whether that is in a prospect mode where you are saying who you are and what you do, you always need to leave them with something of value. So we try to gift as much intelligence as we can in our RFP responses. And the most recent one that we did, thanks to your program, is they sent out an RFP that was a series of questions. It was more like an RFI, but it was a series of questions that let us shine because we could answer their questions with our experience that was relevant to them.
well,
And that gives them
should be.
something of value.
And I think also your focus on those 4 areas, allows you to look at those with a little bit of discretion. And if it's fast food franchise in California, even though you're in Michigan, you have the experience to do that in many cases. So that's great. So I'm not going to record this, but or leave this in. But is there anything I didn't ask that you'd like to talk about? More about your 20th anniversary?
I'd like to go back and talk a little bit more about trust and getting, because that's also related to our DTE client. I don't know how you want to phrase that.
Probably, could I say trust is a core value?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, it's not one of our core values, but what we are feeling is, in today's world, having a relationship of trust with your audience is getting increasingly difficult. What is truth? And
yeah,
the
that's
media
true. Well, yeah, we've been through that, haven't we?
Yeah, the media isn't helping a whole lot.
Mm.
So we are focusing a lot more on in fact, this client that we just won, thank you, is really their goal is they want their customer to trust them. That's our assignment, is help us gain their trust, because
Okay.
they've gone through.
Let me ask the question, because you're on a roll here. I don't want to.
Okay.
So, in today's advertising environment, there are certain things that I believe, and I know you believe, that are really important. And authenticity is a word I hear a lot, and trust is a word I hear a lot. How does that fit into Regroup's philosophy?
Well, it's really, I believe, increasingly important. It's important in driving customer satisfaction. If you don't have trust, you have lower satisfaction scores. Most recently, for this client that you helped us connect with and ultimately win, their assignment to us is to build trust with their customers. They've gone through a period of time in the past where they had disappointing service to their customers. They have completely changed. It's new management, new approaches, innovative approaches, total focus on customer service, but their customers, their audience doesn't necessarily know about that. So in both those cases, whether you are a utility where you're measuring satisfaction and you have to have trust, or a client where you've had a disappointing service record and you need to reestablish it, what we turn to a professional researcher and educator, Kent Grayson, out of Northwestern Kellogg School. And he has developed a 3-part model for trust. And at the base is performance. So you have to be able to perform, or competence, he calls it competence. You have to be able to have competence and deliver what you say you're going to deliver. Above that is, to your point, honesty, transparency, authenticity. There's that level where people have to trust that you are being open and honest with them. And then at the top is benevolence. And that is that people have to believe that you care about them. So obviously you have to have competence or you wouldn't be in business. In today's world, it's really important that you are transparent and honest, and that they understand who you are, not just what you do. And then on top of that is that they have to believe that you care, that you're doing it for them.
Yeah, well, when you get right down to it, that's what effective branding is all about. It's projecting the brand in an authentic way that creates an emotional bond. And that shows that there's some level of care and trust there, I believe. So, well, Jan, this has been great. Very interesting stories. Congratulations on your 20th anniversary, because in the last 2 decades, it's been really tough for a startup. Well, not that you're completely a startup, but a new agency to last 2 decades. So we really appreciate you being on our podcast, and good luck to you and happy anniversary. But
Thank you so much, Roger. It's been great.
Oh, okay. I interrupted you. I'm sorry. So let me say that again. So I'll just end. So good luck to you and happy anniversary.
Thank you so much, Roger. It has been great. I have enjoyed our conversation.
And stay on. I might need, I'm going to pull most of the stuff from your website, and I assume that's okay for B-roll. And the professor that you mentioned at Northwestern, do we have to ask him for his permission to talk about that, or?
No, I can reach out to him and ask him if it's okay with him.
Okay, because I assume he might have some papers or something on that model, which is sort of interesting, I think. And,
yeah, it's a really interesting model.
And there might be a graph or something I could pull.
There is.
Okay,
There is.
If you could
I'll
shoot him
reach
an
out to him.
email. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll shoot him an email and see if it's okay that I just say I mentioned it. Can we? I'll dig up his model and see if we can share that.
And okay, so other than that, I will be in touch if I need anything, but your site has a lot of stuff on it. So and I've probably used too much B-roll in the past, so I think it fills all my needs. So thank you so much, Jan. This has been great. I really appreciate it. I learn every time from the people that I interview. I learn a lot, so as well as finishing a podcast. So there you go. So thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
You take care.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.